power on the other side. Those are the things that lead to inflation. Those are the things that lead to the exchange rate even continues moving devalued, because we have so much naira in the system that somehow it's chasing the dollar, and we don't even have commensurate funding from the dollar side to get this to be able to balance that out. So at the point, the executive needs to be strategic around how it is releasing funds for a lot of projects in the 2022 project.
I think you just said it all, because at the end of the day, we've been talking about fiscal discipline for years, and it's not just about this administration, but perhaps this administration took it further than others. I'm not exonerating other administration, but if you take a look at even the fiscal deficit this year, it's around over 6 trillion naira, and it's above the ceiling that the Fiscal Responsibility Act has, recommended of about 3%. Our fiscal deficit now is above 3%. What do you think would ensure this fiscal discipline? Because it seems we've been talking. What else can we do? Agencies like yours or public advocates such as Budget. You released the report, I think, last year, that we've seen so many projects padded, over 300. I remember I did talk to you last year on that. How do we ensure that fiscal discipline how do we ensure fiscal discipline is taken seriously? And whose responsibility is that?
So if you look at the fiscal, the 2022 project passed by NAS, the fiscal deficit is 6.3 trillion naira. 2015, we didn't even have a budget of 6.3 trillion naira. And if you would adjust for all the projections that have been made on the side of the revenue side that are not realistic, because suddenly the executive feels, the legislature feels the independent revenue agency should bring 1 trillion naira, whereas they have not even been able to reach that mark in recent years. My own problem is that we're borrowing too much. We have a revenue problem. Everybody knows that we have a revenue problem. Everybody knows that our revenue to GDP is around 8%. A decent country revenue GDP is around 15 to 25%. Everybody knows that even our spending to GDP is low. So even as we think we're spending so much, it's 17 trillion naira national budget, which will represent around 50% of the total, of the federal budget, which represents like 50% of the total national budget. It's still relatively low. You're still spending less than 10% of your GDP by the time you put all aggregate government spending at the federal and at the state and the local government together. The challenge is that if you have little, then it behoves on you to be more effective and be more efficient with how you manage those resources. Now, it's just very unfortunate that in a time where your revenue framework is weak and you're borrowing hard to fix infrastructure, that's the time when you used to be able to entrench fiscal discipline. Those are the things that the current government, stood for, when it was running for office in 2015, that it was going to cut excesses, was going to cut facts, and they were going to build a country that, a tight ship that is governed by some ethical opinions. But we don't see that in the budget. We don't see evidence of that in the budget. In fact, a lot of borrowings that we should have had should have been targeted, clearly tied to infrastructure. We have a bit of that, to be honest, but it is not as holistic and strategic as it should be. Funding the debts that we're having should be targeted to infrastructure. And when we talk about fiscal discipline, it's political. Everything in Nigeria also just comes about the political interest into these things. The political economy into this. The leader of the government. Are they interested in fiscal discipline? Do they see the need for fiscal? Do they see the need to have a bit of control over items that keep being funded and maybe to ensure that they represent opportunity for the public good? If the executive head of government does not see that way, then every system just appreciates whatever is, falls into line about whatever happens. So we have to see people putting it down for President Muhammadu Buhari to look into the budget. The only reasons why we had, there was a time we had finance and budget office separately. Then we said we were going to merge them back together. So we now have planning. So we now have Ministry of Budget and National Finance and National Planning. So the entire pipeline from planning to budget to actual financing is in a single agency. So it's very, very easy for you to have smooth coordination if you choose to want to make it happen. So say from the whole planning, this is the idea of what our governance would look like. And we'll make sure that is reflected in our budget. And we'll make sure that anything that is not fit into our planning, it's not funded. Those are the kind of messaging that we expect that the government should have. But it looks like it's just unfortunate that, even on the legislative side or on the executive side, there seems to be no proper coordination about public budget should be an instrument of planning, and we don't see that effectively at all.
Sure, well, let's take a critical look at the numbers. Some of the numbers are from the budget. Those numbers we've talked about, the fiscal deficit, 6.3 trillion. Let's take a look at the exchange rate at 410 naira to $1. All production pegged at 1.88 million barrels per day. That's the daily production. Have it in mind that we did not do this, we did not get up to our volumes last year. OPEC is also on one hand. America is also on one hand saying that we're going to open our taps. So I don't know how realistic that daily production will be this year. For the oil price, it's been pegged at $62 from $57. What other numbers do I have here? Okay, capital expenditure of 5.4 trillion naira. Debt service expenditure about 3.6 trillion naira. Speak to me about some of these numbers, Sean.
I mean, if we look at the debt service of the country, that's one of the biggest pain points that we would have in the 2022 budget. Now, debt service was around, $1 trillion, less than $1 trillion, as at 2013, 2012. Now, suddenly debt service now takes around 3.8 trillion. The target for debt service this year, including the sinking fund, is over 3.8 trillion. And we might even reach the 4 trillion mark in terms of debt servicing. And it's something that is worrisome for us, because if, like I said, we don't do more than 4 to 4.5 trillion max in terms of revenue of the country, no matter how much projections we make. And if you're spending 4 trillion, as of November last year, January to November, almost 90% of every revenue earned by government was used in the service. If you're spending 4 trillion in a way, as I remember last year, January to November, almost 90% of that is a challenge. How there's a conversation that needs to be held around how we look at our debt management strategy. It's hemorrhaging resources that could have been used for the public, and we just continue to borrow more without some form of guidelines to say this is what we would borrow for, and the things we will borrow for will be self-liquidating. So whatever we are borrowing for, there's a clear business case for it, and we ensure that this infrastructure or whatever equipment that we are borrowing for can pay back itself over time. We won't just borrow because we just want to fix budget deficits. We want to borrow because we want to fix infrastructure, and we know that these infrastructures are viable in their own way. The thing about it is this: by the time you look at the old assumptions that were made, exchange rate 4 and 10, is that the true point of exchange rates in Nigeria? We know that most people, even in the retail end, would access exchange rate, from the parallel market, and that doesn't even reflect the rate. And we know those rates there's even been some slight devaluation in recent times, around 435, 437. We know that our production at 1.8 trillion, it should be feasible by the time you look at Nigeria's nominal numbers. But we also know that production disruption, OPEC ceilings, and all that is there. The reality is that Nigeria needs to move its revenue classification, from a oil and a non-oil kind of category. That's just the reality. Every decent country runs its rubric or its infrastructure or whatever its own taxes. So Nigeria needs to come to a country where there's a tax and a non-tax revenue. I remember when I was watching this program a few minutes ago, there was something from Ikechioke that was mentioned about the social contract needs to be fixed. And if you have something that underpins the social contract, it's about taxes and trust and a sense of accountability. Nigeria has to be a country that is governed by social contract. I'm just reiterating that. And the only way you can emphasize that is tax being a two-way system. The government making demands of the people to pay taxes, the people paying taxes with kind of understanding that it's properly used and it will be properly accounted for. Until Nigeria is able to change its paradigm of its own revenue architecture and pay extra attention on taxes. And if you are going to pay extra attention on taxes, it won't just be, oh, we're going to tax people to death. We also have to pay extra attention on sectors, on environments that will generate taxes. If we have a vibrant Nollywood environment, we'll double down on that. If we have a vibrant music industry, we'll double down on that. If we have a digital media that is expanding, we will double down to make sure that that's scalable. If it's going to be agriculture and we do it in a way that's mechanized and is efficient, we will scale that up. If it's real estate, yes, we will have to pay attention to that. So the entire tax architecture of Nigeria needs a reform. It's not just us saying we're going to reform PIA.
Okay.
The entire tax architecture, which component of government, which tier of government is getting, needs significant reform. And now being able to build accountability mechanisms and trust mechanisms into all of that, because it's very, very obvious now. We will not generate by the projections that we have for 2022. The entire revenue is around 3.3 trillion. And then projection that we have for debt service, and that's a very, very huge assumption that we have made here, to even have 3.3 trillion. The total revenue, the total amount we used to service debt alone is 3.8 trillion. So in some sort of way, all revenue can't even service Nigeria's debt anymore. So non-oil taxes is put at 2.1 trillion. The only the government, the independent revenue was raised to 2.2 trillion.
Okay, so I think Shehu, can you hear me? So I think we'll leave it at that for now. We'll continue this conversation on a later date because there are so many things we also need to talk about in terms of how this budget would likely affect Nigerians. You did say earlier that's definitely a pre-election year. Thank you very much, Shehu, for joining us. Solution Wonibide is the co-founder at Budget, and we've been looking at the 2022 budget. At this time, let's quickly bring you this, that the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Godwin Emefiele, has described entrepreneurship as an integral part of any economy, and it plays a key role in driving growth and innovation, which in turn results in job creation. The Apex Bank governor said this during the launch of the Tertiary Institutions Entrepreneurship Scheme in Abuja. Emmanuel Aldo takes it from here for more details, and I'll see you all again tomorrow, God willing. Best you can be and the change that you want to see. I am Nancy Naji.
In July 2021, at the 35th Conference of Vice Chancellors of Nigerian University held at Kano State University of Science and Technology, the Central Bank of Nigeria said it was developing a tertiary institutions entrepreneurship scheme to train and finance entrepreneurship ideas of Nigerian universities, with intention to support the development of entrepreneurial culture through introduction of seamless access to
tertiary institutions entrepreneurship scheme and intervention of the Central Bank of Nigeria that is aimed at addressing the dual challenge of youth unemployment and underemployment in Nigeria. This scheme, developed in partnership with the Nigerian polytechnics and universities, is designed to harness the potentials of graduate entrepreneurs by creating a paradigm shift from the pursuit of white-collar jobs to a culture of entrepreneurship for economic development and job creation in Nigeria. As you all are aware, at the occasion of the 51st convocation of the University of Lagos in July 2021, I delivered the convocation lecture titled National Development and Knowledge Economy in the Digital Age, Leapfrogging Small and Medium Enterprises into the 21st Century. At that event, I promised the Central Bank of Nigeria would seek fresh collaboration with our country's tertiary institutions to develop entrepreneurship programs and to support graduates and undergraduates who have bankable ideas. At that event, it was just an idea that occurred at the point of just making my presentation or presenting my lecture at the University of Lagos in July 2021. Basically, again, I was just looking back at the Nigerian educational sector and Nigerian educational system. And I say, and honestly again, looking back at when we were in the universities, honestly, perhaps at that time there were just few of us that were graduating from the universities. And what we used to see those days would be that by the time you are in your third year or your fourth year, companies, whether it is hospitals, whether it is engineering firms, oil firms, banks, various institutions that play active role in the economy would normally come to the tertiary institutions to interview the students who are graduating with a view to providing them with employment. I say at that time there were few of us. But again, that was when things were good. What am I saying? What this means is that before you graduate from the university, as long as you pass well, you are assured of employment. Indeed, during our time, you find that before our time, those who had first class, second class offer, universities themselves would send them on the comeback and become lecturers.